Hello and welcome. Around the turn of the millennium, some of the most influential FPS games entered the scene and, to a degree, affected what direction other video game series took in the following years. In this video, I will talk about single-player isometric and top-down tactical combat games that didn't go first-person and their evolution from the 90s to the present day. Tactical movement has been a thing in gaming since chess, and possibly even longer. The idea of controlling a small unit and pitting your mind against that of another, or as is the case in single-player games, a computer-controlled opponent, is timeless and a popular pastime. While tactical combat in the real world has a lot more factors at play, the game world carries with it a number of limitations, which makes games require more calculation rather than analysis. Edgar Allan Poe wrote the following: "The faculty of resolution is possibly much invigorated by mathematical study, and especially by that highest branch of it which, unjustly and merely on account of its retrograde operations, has been called, as if par excellence, analysis. Yet to calculate is not in itself to analyze. A chess player, for example, does the one without effort at the other. It follows that the game of chess, in its effects upon mental character, is greatly misunderstood." Poe goes on to mention the importance of attention in such games and how the limited amount of options requires mistakes to be made by one side for the other to gain the upper hand. In chess, the limitations lie in the fixed movement alternatives of the pieces and the limited dimensions of the board. While video games also can have these limitations, there is one other glaring issue. A game AI is written by a human being, and in that lies its greatest limitations. The person creating the artificial intelligence is limited by their imagination, and simply put, this is the reason why we can figure out patterns and exploit them in games with computer-controlled opponents. In games where one or more human minds face off against other humans, each side has to a greater degree the added option of masking their intent by creating diversions and play mind games. Throwing a smoke grenade to screen off part of a battlefield, for example, allows some moves to be made in secret. Here the use of analysis becomes more important for the players. But let's get back to the single-player games. Turn-based tactical video games have been popular for decades, and it still is a popular mechanic in new releases. However, as time goes by, gamers require innovation. In parallel, since tactical games often center around combat, players also want more realism. Not everyone is a trained soldier, and a big point of gaming as escapism is to enter the role of another person and walk in their shoes. In the case of tactical games, many players want to feel like they're real door kickers rather than chess players. So, what ideas have the game developers come up with over the years? Let's take a chronological look. Back in the 90s and around the turn of the millennium, several memorable titles were released. Games like XCOM UFO Defense from 1994,
UFO Detective,
Silent Storm from 2003, and my personal favorite of that time, Jagged Alliance 2 from 1999, all showed that turn-based was the go-to mechanic for developers of tactical combat games. There were outliers, of course, like Yosemite Entertainment and Sierra FX, who chose to use real-time for their isometric title Police Quest SWAT 2 from 1998. The summer of the following year also saw the first beta of Counter-Strike, with the first game mode available, interestingly enough, being Hostage Rescue. And the latter games in the previously mentioned Police Quest/SWAT series also had both of their following titles be in the first-person perspective. The turn-based isometrics of the time had at least one game that stood out, however, and the one I'm thinking of received mixed reviews. Released in 2001, Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel was flavor-wise a letdown for fans of the Fallout franchise, and is even considered non-canon to the Fallout universe by some, which is understandable. Apart from its fair share of bugs like pathing problems and the automatic fire critical hit glitch, as a game of tactical combat it is, in my opinion, okay. In this game they added a new mode they called Continuous Turn-Based, or CTB for short. While the game is listed as pausable real-time, it doesn't actually have a pause function. It was in reality a hybrid between real-time and turn-based, where the speed of which your team members executed their orders was based on ability scores and skills, and on action points that would regenerate over time, which in a way created a higher granularity in the action point economy of the game. In turn, it also made for more flexibility in that you could to some degree synchronize the actions of your team members, although in all fairness it required a lot of quick keying to a point where you felt like you were playing Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 29 on the keyboard. However, this is still a game that deserves a mention for attempting to innovate the genre with its continuous turn-based mechanic. Fast forward a little more than a decade and it's time for fans of the Jagged Alliance series to be let down. The release of Jagged Alliance Back in Action in 2012 was to many fans a disappointment for a number of reasons. The game was meant to be a remake of Jagged Alliance 2 with updated graphics and some fixes for the mistakes of the popular older title. While the remake unfortunately removed some key features of the turn-based predecessor, it did also include one important mechanic, which is the reason I bring it up. In Jagged Alliance Back in Action, the player was able to queue a number of orders for each team member before setting their plan in motion. While it took some getting used to and required some timing, it allowed the player to coordinate actions of very different nature for different members in their team. On a side note, the omission of a traditional turn-based mechanic has been named by many fans as one of the reasons they didn't like the game. A year later, in 2013, variations of these mechanics are still big in games like Breach and Clear, where you plan your entry into space for the whole squad and then execute it all simultaneously. And the following year, in 2014, Door Kickers was released, which in my opinion represent the culmination of this evolution. The latter might in truth be distinguished as a pausable real-time. This is a mechanic that has been popular in RPGs since Baldur's Gate in 1998, and basically breaks down the game time in shorter, arbitrary rounds. However, the introduction of such a mechanic for tactical combat games comes after years of developers flirting with the idea of alternative mechanics to the turn-based tradition, and the refinement of such mechanics into what we see today still constitutes an evolution of the tactical combat game genre. Traditional turn-based games are still released and enjoyed by many, but tactical combat chess is now accompanied by a new type of game, one where the rules make the game feel more smooth and realistic and help the players feel like they're actually working with the well-oiled gears of a well-trained team of professionals. And although it doesn't invalidate the enjoyment of puzzling through a good turn-based title, more variation is still progress in my book. If you liked the video and would like to see more like it, please consider subscribing. Please rate the video, and if you agree or disagree with my analysis, maybe you thought I missed some genre-defining title, please drop a comment in the comment section below. I would also like to mention that if you are interested in checking out some of the older titles mentioned in this video, many of them have passionate communities and mods that fix bugs that were still around after official support ended, as well as fixes for running them on modern systems. Links to a couple of those communities can be found in the information box below the video. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.